Hello, I'm looking forward to being with you on the first day of orientation. But before then, we wanted to provide you with some information about briefing cases. You all know that the ultimate vehicle for resolving disputes under our legal system is litigation. I hope you also appreciate that most disputes never get to trial, never even get to the filing of a lawsuit. They're settled by agreement. But you're going to be reading situations where that did not occur, and where the matter went not only to a trial court, but on up to at least one appellate court. I also want you to appreciate the difference between legal issues and fact issues. Example, the question, is a store liable to a customer who slipped on water that was spilled by a store employee? That question is a legal issue. It asks a legal question. In contrast, if we had a question, was the water spilled by a store employee or by a customer? That's a fact issue. Many disputes involve only fact issues. The parties have no disagreement about what the legal principles that govern might be. Their entire dispute is over what actually happened. You're not going to read cases like that. You're going to read cases that might have some factual disputes, but the legal issues will predominate. Now, I want to talk about a tool that you're going to need to use to help you analyze the cases that you read. It's called a case brief. It's a set of structured notes. It's a tool for you. Nobody else is going to see it. Nobody else is going to read it. So you can structure it as you wish. But I've got some suggestions on at least one way to do it. And maybe, since you're beginners, you might want to try my way at the beginning and adjust accordingly as you go on through the semester. The first thing you need in your case brief is the caption. Now that's pretty easy because that's going to be in the casebook. Many of you read Gideon's Trumpet by Anthony Lewis, so I'm going to use that Gideon versus Wainwright case as an example. If you were reading Gideon in a casebook, this is what you'd see. Gideon V Wainwright, 372 U.S., 355, parentheses, 1963. For your caption, you need the Gideon V Wainwright part. You don't need the numbers, right? You're not going to be looking up, find the volume or the page number where this case may be found because it's in your casebook. But what you do have to do is figure out what that abbreviation US means. What court does that stand for? Well, it stands for the United States Supreme Court. So here's how your caption will look. Gideon V Wainwright, United States Supreme Court, 1963. Obviously, the court that decides a case and the year in which it was decided can be very important. Your caption will give that to you. Of course, your caption does something else for you as well. It's sort of an indexing tool for you. You're going to be writing many case briefs over the course of the semester, and obviously the caption tells you which case this particular brief is about. Okay, the next part is going to be a procedural history, or we might say the posture of the case. That is, where has this case been before it got to the appellate court whose opinion you're reading? Maybe just a trial court, maybe a trial court and an intermediate level appellate court, and then finally perhaps the Supreme Court of a state, or as some states use different names like Court of Appeals. You need to look at the abbreviation in the caption and find out what court decided that case. That's the only tricky thing to do with the caption. Okay, what's the next part of your case brief? Well, as Dean Epps told you in her video on reading cases, right, you're going to read a case a lot of times. More than once for sure, more than twice most of the time, because a lot is going on. This portion of your brief, the context, is going to have the parties, their objectives, and the material facts. Let's go back and use Gideon again to illustrate this. Who are the parties? Well, Mr. Gideon and the state of Florida. What was his objective in this litigation that reached the United States Supreme Court? His objective was to get a new trial, but this time with a court-appointed attorney. What were the material facts? Well, one material fact was that Gideon was accused of a felony. Another material fact was that he could not afford a lawyer on his own. And the third important fact was that he requested the court to appoint him a lawyer, and the courts in Florida denied that request. Those are the key facts upon which the opinion will turn. As Dean Epps also told you in her video, you're going to read the case a second time, a third time, maybe even more than that, for perhaps the hardest part for you to handle, and that is the legal content. What are the issues in the case? What were the theories, the arguments that were put forward by the parties for their position? What did the court eventually hold, and what was its disposition of the matter? Right? That's the legal content, a very, very important part of your case brief. Again, just to illustrate, using Gideon, what was the issue? The issue was, does the United States Constitution require a state to appoint a lawyer for an indigent who is charged with a very serious crime? That's the legal issue. What were the legal theories? Well, the legal theories dealt with the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. I'm not going to go into the details. What was the court's holding? The United States Supreme Court held that, yes, indeed, that Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment requires a state to appoint counsel for one who cannot afford a lawyer, and if that person is charged with a serious crime. What was the disposition of the case? What actually did the Supreme Court do? It reversed the decision of the Florida Supreme Court. It remanded the matter back to the Supreme Court to act in accordance with its decision. That's the legal content. Okay? The next part of your case brief is the most important, and that is the court's reasoning, its rationale for reaching that holding and that disposition. For example, in Gideon, this is where you would focus in on Justice Black's majority opinion, the reasons he gave for his conclusions. And often you're going to have to compare the reasoning of the majority opinion with that of a dissenting opinion. Finally, and this is your last section, the evaluation and synthesis portion of your case brief. Very important to your learning. What you're going to think about first is, what do I think about these opinions that I've just analyzed and I put into my brief? Are they persuasive to me? Are they sound? Do I think the stronger point is made by the dissent or by the majority? You're going to assess that, right? And then you're going to write it down in your case brief. You're also going to think about, how does this case add to my understanding, add to my knowledge? What does it add to the cases that preceded it, to our prior class discussions? That's your synthesis section. Again, you're going to go to that couch, you're going to think about it, you're going to come back and you're going to record it so that you have captured your thoughts in this structured set of notes that we call a case brief. Okay, by way of review, here is the whole template, right? We have the caption, we have the procedural history, right? We have the context, the parties, their objectives, the material facts. We've got the legal content, the issue or issues, the legal arguments and theories, right? We have the holding, the disposition, and then we get to the court's reasoning, and finally, your evaluation of those opinions that you've just considered, and your synthesis, your take away from what this case adds to your knowledge. This is not going to be easy for you at first, I know. The first case we have you read in Litigation Basics is a very short little case, but it's going to take you a while to figure out exactly what's going on. And then we'll be spending some time on it in the Litigation Basic class, going over that very, very short case. But I assure you, with practice, and you're going to get a lot of practice doing case briefs, with practice, you're going to get better at reading cases, you're going to get better at briefing cases, right? You eventually probably aren't going to necessarily need that whole template. You're going to find ways to shortcut, to make things easier to do without losing anything in the quality of your analysis or in the notes that you have for later on. I might also suggest that you take a look at the short document that Professor Schellenberger and I prepared. It's called Thoughts on Reading and Briefing Cases. It's got a bit more detail than I offered in this video, but I suggest you take a look at that before orientation starts as well. See you.